Sealbinder and Levin sounds like a law firm.
Why does Sealbinder's name get to be first?
I don't know.
Well, I would obviously be head partner. So,
all right, let's go. All right, let's rock and roll. Brock Long, awesome to have you back on the walk. First time we did it, it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. You were sitting in front of, now people listen to this, right? Not everybody watches it, but for those that might have watched the video, you were sitting in front of your blinds, I think in your living room maybe. And now you got a nicer office. Congratulations. And it's awesome to have you back. Today, we're just going to wrap. We'll see where this goes. And if I make a mistake, you tell me not to talk about that and we'll back up and we won't talk about it. With that in mind, let's just open the door. There's some things I want to talk about. I wrote down some notes. It included Trump, Pelosi, man-made climate change, and state-sponsored lab leaks. So go ahead. You're up.
Oh, where do I begin with that? First of all, nice shirt. I'm glad your wife Nikki dresses you well, Eric, and it's good to be on the walk here, and in our hometown of Hickory, North Carolina.
That's right, Western North Carolina. I love it, and thank you for the comment on the shirt. First day wearing it, by the way. I waited for this moment to break out the Travis Matthews palm tree shirt, which I'm very proud of, and so thank you, Nikki, for the. I think it was a Father's Day gift. It's one way to write off that expense. Hey, so there's so much that I want to talk to you about. One of the things I love about having conversations like this is just simply talking about the things that maybe a lot of people don't get to hear about. And I was joking with you, obviously, when I said Trump and Pelosi and state-sponsored lab leaks. But you've, I'm sure, been on a lot of interviews where you thought you were going in to talk about a hurricane or a fire or something and got cornered into political speak. That it can't be fun. We're not going to do that today, but I'm sure that's happened to you a lot.
Yeah, unfortunately, look, I think people need to hold our nation's media at arm's length. And anytime while I was the FEMA administrator during two of the roughest years that the agency's ever had, I always pictured myself going to fight the bully when the bell rang at 3 o'clock anytime I got on to an interview. And it's unfortunate that you have to do that, but we live in a world where sensationalism rules the day, and I don't think people are interested in figuring out the real story, and they want to hear the fast food news and the entertainment news, and it's causing us to be pulled into extremes, in my opinion. But I'm just one opinion. You don't have to agree with me, Eric, on that, but it is tough. It is tough. You had to be ready for anything, and it wasn't just the news media; it was also Congress. I think I testified 8 times before Congress. And, here's the thing about that. Congress listened. We got some laws changed. We got the Disaster Recovery Reform Act passed, which led to a whole host of pre-disaster mitigation funding that's now available to help, communities prevent future disasters. But it was also a chance for members of Congress to, say things that hopefully got picked up by Twitter and became viral. And that's the unfortunate reality that we live in.
Well, yeah, and I was reading something recently where the writer was openly admitting that written form of conversation like that is the worst kind of form because it can just be taken in so many different directions. But your point is also that it's not difficult to take a 20-second clip and throw it out to the stratosphere, right, and let people take what they want from it. I think about, though, because I know you as a friend and lots of respect for what you've done, for the country, for the government, for various states, and for with Haggerty that you're with today. But you're also a human being, and one of the things that I can't imagine being in front of Congress or being cornered by a journalist, which I'm one that would openly say I think good journalists are wildly important in the world that we live in to give us information on things that we might not hear otherwise. We just have to figure out who we trust and who we don't trust. But you don't go into those conversations with, do you go in with training? Do you get trained dramatically on how to sit in front of Congress? And then on top of that, the American citizens who those people work for probably would like to hear you talk like a human from time to time, but you're put in a corner where you can't even do that.
Well, look, I think, man, I was given a God-given talent of being able to speak and convince people to understand my position. And I think it was very effective in Congress. And one of the things that I didn't do in Congress was read my testimonies and look like a computer program, just regurgitating words and reading it. I looked people in the eyeballs and took the complex and made it simple. And I think good leaders take complex things and make it simple for everybody to understand and get behind. And I'm not a politician, Eric. I hate politics. I truly was a public servant that got a phone call to go serve my country, and that's what I did. But if you look at some of the congressional testimonies, again, I would look Congress in the eye and I would give them 3 points. Here's the 3 things I'm trying to do: create a culture of preparedness, ready the nation for catastrophic disasters, reduce the complexity of FEMA. You would look them in the eyeball and you would capture their attention and they would listen. And we got some real things changed. I got debt forgiveness for the NFIP. We were able to convince Congress to, again, pass the Disaster Recovery Reform Act. We were able to get 3 supplementals to the Disaster Relief Fund, and they listened. The problem that I saw with the nation's news media, and this is not an attack on journalism, we need good, neutral journalism in this country to help people form their own opinion. Like, here's the story, you decide. That's the way the news was when we were growing up. The problem that I saw in being interviewed hundreds of times probably in my career is that the story's already written before they actually interview, or you see where there's typos in stories. If you read news and there's a lot of typos in there, they're trying to be first, not correct. And and that's where we are. And we've got to demand more when it comes to journalism and professional journalism. I also think that editors in the back room of these major news networks are the ones stifling creative journalism and real journalism too. And I've seen that. I stopped at one point doing taped media interviews with major news networks because they can take it, splice it, turn your words, put it out there and fit it right into their storyline. And I would rather do live media, and so that I could defend the agency, defend the positions that we have, and have a real conversation. But you'd be amazed at the number of people that don't want to do that. They don't want to go through and converse back and forth in a live setting.
Yeah, that's why I think environments like this are so important. Or when you listen to others' podcasts where you have the opportunity to long form discussions and go deep down rabbit holes, or maybe even when you're in an environment where there's someone that is with you that can take a counterpoint, you just have a healthy conversation back and forth versus only hearing one side of it or a quick snippet. I want to go back. To earlier in your life, because the other thing, the flip side of you communicating like a human, is that I think too many times we meaning those watching someone like you or watching leaders make decisions, you don't think back to maybe who these people were coming up, which might help you figure out why they shape why they have the decisions or the ideas that they have, what shape their decisions. I was talking with my wife, with Nikki, before an election a while back, and one of the things we talked about was, we ought to get an opportunity to interview that politicians or whoever we're voting for. We should get an opportunity to interview their friends and their business associates to get a better idea of who they actually are, right? Because we don't get to do that. Was there a point when you were a high school or college kid and you thought, I want to be the head of FEMA one day? Like, was that even in your brain back then?
It's funny. The first storm, I say the first storm I ever worked was Hurricane Hugo in 1989. I was 14 years old. And if I remember correctly, Hurricane Hugo was it was moving at 27 miles an hour forward speed, which means, you know, a hurricane loses half its intensity 12 hours after landfall. So that meant that it made a beeline from my hometown, Newton, North Carolina, population 14,000, you know, and it was a category 1 hurricane over my house. And I can remember my dad and I discussing as it passed over in the middle of the night, the changing of the winds and how, you know, we saw the eye come over and the calmness of that. And then when we got done, we went outside, there were like 24 trees down in our yard, 8 of them were across the driveway. And we spent, you know, probably almost 10 days without power. I was out of school for 2 weeks and still never heard of FEMA. You know, FEMA wasn't present really, you know, to a large degree back then, particularly 5 hours inland.
Well, that's what I was going to say. To give some context, we're 5 hours inland.
Yeah. 5 hours inland. And I call it the forgotten inland wind hurricane event that's going to hit us again one day. But yeah, if you're listening, you're in the area, you need to be prepared. But but here's the thing, you know, I didn't learn about FEMA until graduate school at Appalachian State University. I was getting a master's in public administration, and I heard a classmate of mine do a paper on how FEMA was reformed as a result of Hurricane Andrew in 1992, and whether that, you know, the reforming of FEMA was successful or not, you know. And the gentleman's name was Eddie Smith. I think he's the deputy city manager of Kannapolis, North Carolina. And he had also done a graduate internship with New Hanover County, Wilmington, North Carolina, where you went to college, Eric, and in emergency management. And I thought, man, that sounds pretty awesome. I think I'd like to do the same thing. Can you set me up, you know, with your contacts there? And sure enough, that's what happened. So I got into it by doing a graduate internship at the local level of emergency management, New Hanover County. And that's how my career, you know, took off. And I physically wrote, you know, banged out a resume. And you got to remember, you know, Eric, I had my first email in college, right? And we barely used it and was like, man, this is terrible. Why do I have to use email? But I wrote a cover letter and I sent my resume out to different state emergency management agencies in states I thought I wanted to live in, like Colorado or, you know, wherever. And Georgia was the first one to bite. And I got an interview, and I went down there and interviewed and got the job and became a school and university safety coordinator. But what was interesting is that every time I seemed to change jobs, something catastrophic happens. Okay, so when I got the job with Georgia, I was told to go to Savannah, Georgia, where my office would be. And I moved all of my stuff into an apartment without any renter's insurance in a category 1 vulnerable storm surge area. And Hurricane Floyd was threatening the state, was threatening the entire East Coast from Florida to Delaware. I threw all my stuff in an apartment and then drove to Atlanta to go work in the State Operations Center and watch one of the nation's largest evacuations take place from Hurricane Floyd in 1999. And I had no idea how vulnerable I was, you know, and I learned a lot. And so my career has just been shaped by, you know, real events, you know, and being in an industry at the right time that was professionalizing. I got in on the ground floor. You couldn't go to college to be an emergency manager. And now you can. And so I really believe that my career was successful because I got in at the right time.
When you went to work on your master's, where was your head as far as your career goes before you heard that speaker talk about FEMA?
You know, funny enough, I always wanted to be an airplane pilot and learned to fly at a very young age. But for some reason, I didn't follow that dream. And, you know, I thought I wanted to go into federal law enforcement as well. But for whatever reason,
your undergrad was criminal justice, right?
Yeah, criminal justice with a minor in computer information systems back at the time. But I think we were learning like Fortran and Cobalt and, and stuff like that. But you know, we were learning the internet at the time, and but it just didn't work out that way, right? And again, emergency management was by accident. So when I left graduate school, I was offered 2 jobs. I was offered a job as a budget analyst with the city of Asheville, North Carolina, and I was offered the job of Georgia Emergency Management Agency. And by faith, I took the leap to Georgia, and then it was nonstop from that point. I mean, you know, I've seen the worst of the worst in my career, and let's hope it doesn't get worse. But I think it could, you know, down the road.
Was there something when in that first job in Georgia, was there a trigger that convinced you that this is going to be your lifelong career? Or I mean, because sometimes we go into jobs, right, where it's in the beginning, it's a bit of a means to an end. I need to start making some money. I need to get out on my own. I need to start taking care of myself. But was there something in Georgia that triggered for you that this is where I need to be?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think by nature, God made me a diplomat and a public servant. Two, I've never really chased money. I didn't chase money out of college. I chased an interesting job career. And you know what was awesome about the Georgia Emergency Management Agency is I was teaching teachers how to spot weapons on kids or how to mitigate, school shootings and doing different things, do risk analysis, develop emergency operations plans. It was by far one of the greatest jobs I've ever had and the least paid job that I've ever had as well. And the money didn't matter. I was truly enjoying going to work every single day and loving what I was doing. And I knew I was making a difference because, you would get the reports of where a school that you had influenced, found a weapon or prevented a suicide, all kinds of things. And it was awesome. But hurricanes for some reason have been a major part of my life, starting with Hurricane Hugo and then Floyd, when I went in and there was an opportunity. I've always looked for opportunities to excel. And my biggest advice to people is, if you want to move up in your career, you have to physically be willing to move to new locations. I have moved all over this country. My poor wife and kids have moved all over, to many different places as opportunities became available. And being willing to do so, I think it allowed me to also excel very quickly in a very short time frame.
So you go from, you start in Georgia. When do you end up in Alabama?
So I went to Georgia Emergency Management, School Safety Coordinator. I was promoted to State Hurricane Program Manager, largely designed to do hurricane evacuation planning, right? I interviewed with FEMA Region 4 in Atlanta on the morning of 9/11. No kidding. And that's where I was on the morning of 9/11 in an interview to become a hurricane program specialist, largely in charge of doing two things, doing evacuation planning from North Carolina to Mississippi and those 6 coastal states, and also running a forward deployed team to the National Hurricane Center of taking forecasts and turning them into risk and vulnerabilities for local communities, state governments, military, whatever it may be. And my boss at the time retired while I was in office. I was able to go into his job. I became the Hurricane Program Manager in 2004. And as soon as I did, again, every time I changed jobs, something catastrophic happens. Florida got hit by 4 storms in 6 weeks. Charlie, Francis, Ida, Gene. Next year was Katrina and Rita and Ike. And I saw an agency go from one of the best places to work to one of the worst. I saw the transition from FEMA going into Homeland Security, what worked, what didn't, the morale inside FEMA. I learned a lot from that. And after Katrina, it was interesting. I decided to leave, Eric, because, morale was in the tank at FEMA. And I was one of those that was like, forget this, I'm out. I went into the private sector. And then 6 months later, we moved back to Hickory, North Carolina, bought a home. 6 months later, I get a phone call out of the blue from Governor Bob Riley in Alabama to consider running the Alabama Emergency Management Agency. And I was 32 years old at the time. I was a young kid, dumb enough to take the job on. And I can't believe, I actually got selected to do it. And I went and we went to Alabama for 4 years. And got a whole host of new events, including Deepwater Horizon.
And so just backing up, so that was post Katrina when you went to Alabama,
right?
Right. How did you? Okay, I want to back up even a little bit more though. So, because I'm really curious about this one, you're in an interview, I think you said, in Georgia when 9/11 happens.
Yep, sure was.
So you weren't at home in a comfortable place. You were in a government building, I'm assuming. In an interview, were there televisions up in that building where you could actually see what was happening?
Sadly, during the interview, we knew what was going on, and they decided to move forward with my interview because I was there, and we were locked in the building and locked down. And I'm thankful, that the interview continued to happen because, I'm not sure what my career would look like if they had canceled it and never, and never gone on with the interview. It's amazing. I mean, small things can lead you down a different path. And that's one of the days where, I'll never forget it, but there was such a somber mood in the interview, and I had to compartmentalize what was going on in this country, the tragedy that was going on in this country, but also focus on, here's why you should select me to be a hurricane program specialist.
I know we all know where we were on that day. And I was in an uncomfortable environment. I was actually starting a new job and was surrounded by people that I hadn't built trust or any relationships with. And I remember feeling pretty paralyzed, as I'm sure we all did, but I was ignorantly paralyzed. I have no inner workings of what's going on from a government perspective, or, is this the beginning of something a whole lot worse and a whole lot bigger? I've got a young family at the time. Did in that building surrounded by government officials, I'm curious what the mood was or what it felt like. Was there a sense of that there's something much bigger? And it's so weird to say much bigger. I mean, it was a horrible disaster in and of itself, with incredible loss of life. But I'm curious what that environment felt like, not just in your head, but what you were watching around you.
Too many unknowns. There was an expectation of expect the worst. What else is about to happen? We cannot take too many precautions, those types of things. And after the interview, I left the facility, drove all the way back to Savannah, listening to the radio and just trying to wrap my head. I had a 3.5, 4 hour drive back to Savannah from Atlanta, and just trying to wrap my head around that day. But it changed the trajectory of my career path too. I mean, because I did end up at FEMA afterwards, and then I watched the agency go through the transition of being put into the Department of Homeland Security. And quite frankly, I wish FEMA was not part of the Department of Homeland Security. FEMA should be a neutral agency outside of that department that is allowed, that's not, where the administrator is not presidentially appointed, Eric, and it's allowed to do its job, outside of politics, regardless of who the president of the United States is. But I think that because it's under Homeland Security, it will always be part of the political fodder and craziness that exists in our country.
What triggered that also for FEMA to roll up to Homeland Security?
Well, there was a massive consolidation. I think of like 22 agencies, 21 agencies. I can't remember the exact number. And 9/11 was the catalyst to bring information sharing together. And look, I'm not the there are people that have written books on this and reports and why it was done, but ultimately there was a lack of sharing information in the intelligence community about threats, and so Homeland Security was brought together to kind of combat that problem a little bit, and that was only one of the small reasons that it was brought together. Why FEMA got pulled into it, I really don't know. But when we were inside FEMA, from my perspective, you started to see the Federal Emergency Management Agency's seal and emblem be erased. All the numbing, all of the emblems were taken off documents, and it was almost like we were being stripped of our identity and didn't know what the future held inside FEMA. And as we were being wrapped into this massive behemoth, new department that's larger than the United States Marine Corps.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that in a minute. One thing that I learned through you was, somebody that went to college on the coast of North Carolina. FEMA to me was the government enterprise that came in to help clean up disasters after they happened, and the entity that people were waiting for their checks. My car got hit by a pine tree, and I'm waiting for my FEMA check to come. And as I was a college student, that's how I envisioned FEMA. That's what FEMA was. But then doing research on the history of FEMA, I mean, FEMA in the beginning had nothing to do. This wasn't a take care of natural disasters kind of administration. This was a continuity of government that was designed for a different reason. And I don't want to go too deep into that, but am I close?
Yeah, look, okay, first of all, I love FEMA. I love the people in it. I think that, an overwhelming majority of the people inside FEMA are true public servants, not self-servants. There's plenty of self-servants in DC, but these are public servants that go out and sacrifice their families. They go out on massive deployments for months, if not years at a time, way to help other people. The agency was designed to be supplemental, never to make a disaster victim whole. Okay, it is relief. It isn't a relief agency, not an emergency agency, but a relief agency to kickstart disaster, recovery and to spawn the conversation of disaster resilience. But like your image of FEMA is part of the myth that we have to overcome in this country. And I think, unfortunately, we're headed in the wrong direction. So many people think that if they lose their home, then FEMA is going to replace it. No, that's the whole purpose of insurance. Insurance is the first line of defense. But of all the disasters I've seen and spending my whole career in emergency management, disaster preparedness, response, and recovery is a team sport. If you have the most critical element of disaster response and recovery is neighbor helping neighbor, not FEMA. If you have neighbor helping neighbor and a true culture of preparedness within your citizenry, all the way through to the federal government coming together to overcome a disaster, then it goes pretty well. If communities are only dependent upon FEMA as being the backstop of all things, it's not going to go well. We saw that in Maria, we saw it in Katrina after Louisiana, and there are people that probably want to punch me in the mouth for saying that, but it's the truth. When FEMA is the lead agency having to manage the disaster on behalf of state, local governments and citizens, it's not going to go well because it's a partnership, and we have to go forward thinking that. Citizens have to do their part to be prepared, Eric. But here's the thing. You can graduate from Harvard, you can graduate from a prestigious school in the ACC, SEC, and still not know how to do CPR or invest money into the stock market or understand the importance of insurance. We don't give practical education that will save lives or reduce the impact of disasters in the future. We don't do it. Not to the degree that it needs to be done. Let me put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, there's clearly an educational component to this where people know just enough to be dangerous. And then when something happens, the assumption is that certain things should kick into place. And then there's an incredible amount of emotion for good reason when those things don't kick into place. If I lose a loved one, or if I lose my home, or if I lose some belongings, I'm highly emotional in that moment. And if you couple that with a lack of education, that's incredible fuel to what's already a pretty damaging fire. I get it. And I know, something that I think a lot of people appreciated about you when you would testify in front of Congress, or we would see you in interviews, was that you were incredibly consistent and predictable in your messaging around preparedness. Not the idea of something is in place to take care of me after a disaster has happened, but what do we do leading up to it? And we can circle back to that, but go back. So let's go back to Alabama. I want to lead up to you getting that phone call about the head of FEMA position, but going back to Alabama, I mean, you lived through, you were involved in Katrina, as I recall, at some level. You were very involved in Deepwater Horizon. Talk about a couple of those events. Any stories or things that stand out that were pivotal, that you still remember, that maybe people like me and others didn't hear about or wouldn't think about?
Yeah, well, the nation has what I call hazard or hurricane amnesia. These bad disasters happen, and we don't seem to learn a whole lot from it, and we continue our bad habits down the road. And one of the things that drives me crazy, if you look at the statistics of this year during COVID, construction has been taking place at the fastest levels of ever before. More houses are being built, right, than ever before, but they're not being built to a code that will withstand all the hazards that they'll face, whether it's floods, wildfires, or whatever else. We're not learning anything here, Eric. We continue to, get blown up and repeat the process, rebuild and repeat the process, rather than passing proper land use planning codes for, sea level rise or climate change or whatever, or residential and building codes, right? And that's the thing that I've learned is that it's just you want to bang your head against the wall. We went through Katrina, right? Katrina actually came over my head at the National Hurricane Center when I was in Miami, strengthened from a tropical storm to a Cat 1. And when it went over our head and got into the Gulf, we knew we were in trouble, because typically land interaction, storms would dissipate, or be reduced in their intensity. And Katrina was odd. It got stronger while it was passing over South Florida, got into the Gulf, and man, our hearts were sinking, going, man, somebody is about to get hit, hard. And we knew it because the environment was set up and trying to warn. Deepwater Horizon, while I was director of Alabama, I was a state incident commander, co-state incident commander, for Deepwater Horizon, a man-made technological disaster. And with that one, I got my butt chewed more in Deepwater Horizon for things so far outside of my control during that event.
Like what? To give me some examples.
Keep oil off the beaches. Well, there's no way to boom off, your coast or or Mobile Bay or whatever.
So you're the one that made that call?
No, there was a boom war across the Gulf. I mean, Florida to Texas was in this war to buy boom and try to protect their inlands as much as possible, but it was a futile attempt. I mean, there's just
just so, because maybe I don't know what that means. You said buy boom. What does that mean?
Boom, oil boom, to keep oil.
Okay, that's what I thought you meant. But I thought maybe it was an acronym for something more.
No. It was this incredible game. There was no declaration that really helped citizens. Citizens were losing their livelihood because it was hitting at the prime time beach season, where
right,
seasonal, restaurants and mom and pop shops, and they were getting killed, going out of business. I think the suicide rate went up, and and it was just one of those things where it was like the movie Groundhog Day, where you woke up and every day was the same.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you really, you feel for that mom and pop shop who is completely seasonal and has a business that relies on tourism. This thing happens, their state and their federal government is making decisions to protect lives, obviously, but you're also, that decision that was triggered by an event also potentially destroys livelihoods. And that, it's a highly emotional, you're going to get chewed out. There's no way that you're not, even if you're making the right decision.
Yep. The losses are generational. It's not just, what did the hurricane blow up that we could rebuild or whatever. The losses were generational. The fishing industry went out, and then you don't think about how far the disaster reached into America. So what if you were the accounting firm located in New York that was
your clients were tied to, that's right,
over the seafood industry or
right,
whatever else. And so it was very difficult trying to figure out who should receive, money from BP, penalty funds or whatever, whatever it may be. But the difference between Deepwater Horizon versus a hurricane is the forecast gives us hope in that the hurricane is eventually going to go away. Deepwater Horizon kept going and kept going. I think, close to 80 days of, man, is this ever going to end? And it was a different feel for a man-made technological event.
With Katrina and Deepwater Horizon, which for you, I would think were the first two big events that put you in the spotlight at some level, was that also the first opportunity for you to interface with leaders that you had never interfaced with before, whether that's a president or the head of FEMA at the time?
Yeah, so being at the National Hurricane Conference or at the National Hurricane Center, running what was called the Hurricane Liaison Team, you were in charge of basically putting together high-level briefings so that the director of the National Hurricane Center could brief anybody from the President of the United States down to local officials. And so you never know who was going to wind up on some of these video calls or who was going to demand, an explanation on the forecast or request it. Deepwater Horizon went all the way up to the president. You know, President Obama came to Grand Isle, Louisiana. The governors flew down to meet, you know, with the president there. You know, you met with the Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano.
So were you physically meeting these people?
Yep, absolutely.
And so, because again, I'm thinking of the average Joe like me, right? Who you're doing your job, you're completely compartmentalizing what it is you have to do to be effective in your job, and then you're standing in front of the president of the United States. Like, what was that moment like for you? Can you even remember, or is it a blur?
I mean, even in my experience of being on Air Force One or Marine One or standing in the Oval Office, it's still surreal. When I was in high school, little old Newton Conover High School, I never imagined I'd be standing in the Oval Office, and riding on Air Force One was a thing of dreams because I loved aviation. You know, those types of things. But to be there, it was a surreal feeling. You were always you know, on edge and nervous, you know, because you're about to brief the president of the United States, or you're about to brief, you know, officials, governors. I mean, there was a day I spoke to 8 governors when I was FEMA administrator on all the issues from California wildfires to the Virgin Islands, you know, being hit, you know, by Irma and Maria, and, you know, and so, you know, in that job, you cover half the globe, and you know, it was crazy. It almost got normal to a point where you were dealing with governors and the White House and other things. But it's also surreal. It wasn't like something, you know, there would be so many crazy days that you would go home and try to package it up and say, you know, talk to your, you know, my wife or kids and try to explain it. You just can't do it. And you know, there's only a handful of people that were around me, you know, quite a bit, that understand the pressure and you know, the responsibility and the magnitude of those jobs and holding those positions. And you know, but when you come home to Hickory, North Carolina, I think people respect the fact that you went up there and tried to do your best by serving your country, but they have no idea how hard and the pressure that was on you and your mind. And it takes a long time to shed that when you're done.
I have no doubt. You know, I think I try to put myself in maybe that position, and you know, you're now interfacing with people that you probably, as an American citizen, seeing people on television and being a voter, you built perceptions and realities around these people that you had never met before. And then when you physically meet an individual and you go into business with them, which is what you were doing when you were dealing with Deepwater Horizon, when you were dealing with Katrina, you now probably then see these people in a completely different light. And sometimes it's probably way more positive than you thought it would have been. You can give me examples if there are any. And then there's other times where it's probably way more negative than you ever would have thought it would have been. And you don't have to tell me who those people are, but I'm sure that you were in rooms with people back then where you thought, how does somebody even end up in a leadership position? I'm talking to somebody who can never understand what I'm talking about. And then the flip side are individuals, maybe you didn't give them credit because you only saw them on the news, and now you're meeting them in person and you're realizing the value that those individuals bring to this particular equation.
Yeah, well, you know what's interesting, Eric? So in 2017 and 18, if you add up all the recovery dollars that are going to go out from FEMA as a result of the 2 years I was in office, it's more than the 9 previous FEMA administrators before me combined. Okay, wrap your head around it.
Wow.
Okay. You know, not only were you dealing with half the globe, from Tinian and Saipan that got hit by the strongest hurricane you never heard of, U2, while I was in office, all the way to the Virgin Islands. You're dealing in one of the craziest political environments on either side, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I don't care, you know, but it's just too crazy to serve your country in the current environment while you're up there. When you're placed in that, and you're running an agency full of 21,000 people, and, you know, there's more people in the agency than were in my hometown growing up. Okay, so think about that, right? So you're managing all of this, you know, and because it was so chaotic, I met everybody, no matter who was the biggest, you know, government official, from the president to the House, the Senate, to major news media personalities. I met them all, you know, in some light or form. I think a majority of the people that take presidential appointments truly go up to serve their country. There are others who go up to self-serve, no doubt about it. And I ran into some great people that constantly got beat up in the media that at the end of the day were like me. They went up to serve their country and do what they thought was best. When it came to leading their profession or leading the agency that they led. And then, you obviously run into people who are self-servants looking to, get their name on something and move on to the next greatest thing, by all means. And that part's sad. But the thing that I don't think a lot of people know is that they automatically assume that, I knew President Trump when I got appointed to be FEMA Administrator. I didn't know the president. I don't run in the same circles remotely that he did, his family did, or anything like that. I literally got a phone call, from the White House. And here's the thing about FEMA. Anybody that politics to become the FEMA Administrator has no clue what they're doing, what they're asking for, and they're probably not the right person that you want to take that job. Eric, the phone call I got was from General John Kelly. I'd never met the man. Deep respect for what he's done. And he called me and said, Brock, why do you want to leave beautiful Hickory, North Carolina to come work in this cesspool I got to deal with every day?
But he's being honest, right?
And my answer was very honest. General, I don't. And that's how I responded.
He was trying to he was playing disqualifier to see if he could then qualify.
But I think, but at the end of the day, and I'm not going to speak for him, I think he was being badgered by people going, you need to interview this person, congressmen, senators, you need to interview this person, you need to interview that person. And I think at the end of the day, he was looking for somebody that was genuinely, apprehensive about taking the job, but could do the job. And that was me. Having been with Mike Brown and briefing Mike Brown directly, he was sitting beside me during Katrina and different things. And I know
Mike Brown was the FEMA administrator at that time. Right?
At that time, yeah. I knew that one event could turn you into the nation's scapegoat, and it scared me to death. Going into FEMA, and I'm not a politician, so I never politicked to be the FEMA administrator. I think the comprehensive body of my work got me noticed and got my resume put out there. I still to this day don't know why I got the phone call from John Kelly, General Kelly, but it happened. I took it and I told the general, I said, I'm not really interested in going to DC, but what can I do to serve my country? And at the time when he called, I didn't think he was going to ask me to be FEMA administrator. I actually thought it would have been deputy administrator or something else, but it was the real deal. And then what was very interesting after that was, you basically go under this cloud, this dark cloud of keep your mouth shut, keep your head down, don't say a word to anybody for 6 months as you go through this incredibly painful process to be considered for a Senate, presidentially confirmed, Senate confirmed position. And it was quite painful, to go through that process.
Going back to the General Kelly phone call, I'm curious how that unravels. You don't just get a phone call from General Kelly, right? Well, somebody must call you beforehand and say, hey, we're getting ready, this is going to happen, and we're going to get it scheduled. I want you to do a couple things. Back up and talk about that moment and how that unfolds, and talk about how you felt. And I don't want to hear preparedness, or I don't want you to talk FEMA brain. I just want you to be Brock for a minute. When how did that unfold, and what was going through your mind? What kind of conversations were you having with Mandy and Jonah and Isaac, your boys? Like, what was it?
Eric, it was really strange because there were names being floated out there that they were going to be the next FEMA administrator, and in the world of DC Politico world, there are people who self-promote and they want to be the FEMA administrator, so they start to get to the media and they put their name out there that they may be the next pick, and that happens. And so that's going on, and there's a lot of phone calls going around and rumors and going around. My name was nowhere on the radar screen, at the time, which was interesting. But it literally boiled down to, I got a phone call from the White House one day from somebody I don't know. I actually thought it was one of my good friends like Jeff Byard, or you for the matter, Eric, you could have been Eric Levin.
I wasn't at the White House. It wouldn't have been me.
This is the White House.
over there.
This is the White House. Have you ever said anything negative about your country? Have you ever, and you go through a series of questions and you're kind of answering these like, man, who is this?
Right.
And it eventually it boils down to, would you be interested in serving your country? And then you're like, okay, yeah, this is getting real. And they start, and there's a series of questions. And then I literally hung up, and the next phone call I got was General John Kelly. And it was that question. And, we spoke for a lengthy period of time. I kind of provided him a vision of, if I was running FEMA, this is what I would probably do and where we need to go as an agency. And then starts the whole background check piece. You fill out a mountain of paperwork because you hold a top secret compartmental, clearance on that job, and you've got to they go through your whole life all the way back to your 18th birthday. And, they're interested in who, what, where you've been, how did you make money? How did you spend your money? From drug use to your personal life. Do you run around on your wife? Do you, they want to know your character as well. And the FBI comes to your house and interviews you, and, they talk to your family, your friends. I don't even know if they talk to you, Eric, but,
I can't neither confirm nor deny.
He does not recall that situation.
But yeah. But, you sit there and it's painful. And then what's funny about it is that, the White House doesn't trust the FBI's background checks, so they do their own. They go look out and they look at your presence on the internet. What have you said? What are you posting on the internet? And a lot of people are shooting themselves in the foot by their social media stances.
Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. Yeah.
Any young folks listening to this, when you post your opinion, it doesn't cause anybody to love you or respect you more. And you're crossing a line that you may have to answer for down the road. If
you can't take it back. It's memorialized now. That's right.
Yeah, the NSA has a backup of it, so it's unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. I mean, everything I'm saying in this, I could be, held responsible for down the road, but I don't have any plans of going back to DC anytime soon. So be it.
So I know we've got. I want to be sensitive to time. There's still a couple of other things I want to ask about. How do you? There's no way to prepare for a couple things. Well, tons of things. But number one, you can't prepare yourself for DC. I mean, you're not a DC person. You're not a politician. But now you're thrown into DC. So somehow you've got to prepare yourself for that. Number two, you are now running something that is as large as the largest companies in our country, in the world. And you've never done that before. I mean, you've run divisions, you've run state channels. I think you said 20,000+ individuals and a budget of what? What was the budget of FEMA when you started?
I mean, the operational budget was like 16 billion, give or take a billion.
16 billion
with the B.
But if you put all the money together, it's hundreds of billions of dollars that I ended up having to ask for from Congress to fix things. But Eric, I mean, great question, right? So Claire McCaskill, the senator out of Missouri, was on my oversight committee in the Senate. She called my FBI background check remarkably thin, and which was a good comment, right? And it was because I did not have a robust social media, presence. I don't do social media other than LinkedIn for business purposes. The rest of it, you can have it. I don't want anything to do with it. Y'all have fun. The other thing is that I wasn't a billionaire, which is also the stigma that if you're going to work for, the president, you got to be a wealthy person. I'm not a wealthy person. I'm a government service, person, and definitely not wealthy. The thing about it is that people didn't see me as a politician. I wasn't a politician. I was an emergency manager that as a public servant, I want to help people. And so I got confirmed in the Senate 95-4. Okay. You're always going to have the 4 political votes that, whatever. That's fine. But 95-4, which I think says a lot. And we need more, people that can go up there and be neutral and serve their country. And, with that, taking over FEMA was a daunting task. But anytime, and this is the thing for people that are looking for leadership advice or anything else, leadership is actually more simple than you realize. One, you got to learn how to do public speaking. You've got to be able to represent your agency, look out ahead of it, your business, your agency, look out ahead of it and your people. And if you can speak convincingly, people will walk off a cliff with you, right? The other thing that I've always done anytime I've taken over an organization, I always ask 3 questions. Where are we? Where do we need to be? How do we get there? And I didn't ask that just figuratively. I literally walked around the building and asked hundreds of FEMA employees, hey, what's one thing you would change? Where do you think we are as an agency? Where would you like to see the agency go? And we actually ended up organizing that and bringing it together to build the 5-year strategic plan. And every employee, not only at the employees within FEMA, but at the state and our partners at the state and local level and the private sector that supports us, was given the opportunity to answer those 3 questions. And we did a trend analysis and built the strategic plan. And what I learned from that is if you're the type of leader that goes into an organization and says, this is how it's going to be, and you shoot the messengers that bring you bad news, 1, you have no idea how bad things are in your organization. And 2, in government, they will wait you out because they know you are temporary as a presidential appointee. But if they have ownership in it and they're allowed to voice their opinion, then they get behind you and they see that you truly are trying to do what's right for an agency. And it's something that I have embodied. You don't have to read books about it. If you treat people the way they want to be treated, the way you want to be treated, or love your neighbors, you love yourself, and you get them involved and ask them their opinion on things and keep asking them their opinion and take action on the things that you can take action on, they'll walk off a cliff with you. And those, and that's, I really feel like I had the support of 20 of the 21,000 people at FEMA, and I always had their back. I always defended them. I did not let the nation's media and politicians, beat the agency up and say that we failed because we didn't. We rendered a hell of a lot of assistance and put out a ton of goodwill that the nation's news media will never pick up or talk about. They never talk about the lives that have been put back together by the agency or the massive amounts of dollars that have gone into communities to make them more resilient. You're not going to hear about that because you can't tweet that out in 140 characters, and you can't point the finger at anybody when good is being done. And that's the problem.
That's incredible advice as far as leadership goes. And I'm really glad you got that out. In the midst of all of it, also, I think that leaders of any kind, and by the way, there are leaders that don't lead people, right? There's all kinds of leaders. And I think that's what you were proving when you walk around the halls of FEMA and ask those questions. Those individuals might not be leading people, but they were certainly leading projects. They were leading things that were necessary to the ultimate success of the organization. They were leaders as well. But you were the quarterback, and I know that from stories I've heard of when you left and the feedback that you received from those that worked with you, you were a hell of a quarterback, and they viewed you as a hell of a quarterback. And in the midst of all of that, I think that quarterback needs a support system to keep them grounded and to keep them strong. And Mandy and your boys that held it down, and you can go on this for a long, long time about how people that get put in positions like you were put in, where I'll just say it because you won't, you take a pay cut flat out. You move to a part of the country that you didn't want to live in. By the way, I remember asking you a question when you were going through the interview process, because look, a company like ours, a software company, we want to hire a new engineer or developer or head of business development. What am I doing? I'm flying them to San Clemente, California, or to Hickory, North Carolina to have a conversation with them. So I remember asking you, all these flights back and forth, they're picking up your tab, right? Nope. Nope. Brock, the Long family.
Regardless of what was being portrayed out there. And one, if you, regardless of who you want to, what president you work for, if you decide to go to DC, just know you're under attack right off the bat. Going back
and even forgetting that, I mean, my point is just that there is a perception of how things are probably working. And they don't work that way.
So let's start with my wife and kids. They truly serve their country.
Absolutely.
You can't imagine the crap that my family and my kids went through. They were comments made to my kids at school. Facebook and Instagram are not safe. My wife would get, threats and nasty comments from, God knows who they were, in Facebook and Instagram. All kinds of things. You can't imagine the scrutiny. Plus, it was a pay cut, and DC is expensive. You have a mortgage in Hickory, and then you've got to find a really expensive apartment to live in, and it truly is serving your country. And
I'm not suggesting that anybody should feel sorry for you, but you're not suggesting that either. I just want to get that out. I don't need for anybody to feel sorry for us. Yeah, but I do think people should know, because I didn't know. Like, I'm assuming you're flying first class 5 or 6 times to go to DC to meet with General Kelly and the president. You made an investment to be able to make a decision that ultimately was going to impact your family one way, but you felt like, and your family felt like, this was a calling to serve your country in a way that was really important at the time. And you made an investment in that, and your family made an investment in that.
Yeah, well, my wife's incredible. I mean, she has always supported me in the moves that we've gone, and she's up and, moved, along. I mean, we've been in Georgia, Alabama, North Carolina, DC, back and forth. And she basically became a single mother for 2 years, because, while you're trying to lead an agency, you're physically gone, you're also mentally gone, even when you're around your family. And that takes a long time to overcome. I mean, PTSD is a real thing too, when you have these deployments and that type of stress. But they've been through it. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Eric, regardless of what people say, my youngest son, Isaac, wrote me a letter and asked me to quit my job and resign. And that's why I did. Yeah, dude. I've still got the letter over here in my office. So it was tough. It took its toll on everybody. And at the end of the day, I know that through going up there, I was able to change laws. I was able to change perspectives on the way that we look at disasters in the future. And as a result of my time there, we're going to put more disaster money, pre-disaster mitigation money out in the community than ever before, because I was able to convince Congress to do that. And that it was awesome, to being able to do that. The rest of it, unfortunately, is as a nation, and I would always tell my FEMA staff this, Eric, is that you don't have to agree with each other. You don't have to agree with everybody's perspective on everything, about life or work or whatever else. But at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. Can we at least just try to break bread at the end of the day and sit down and realize we may have different perspectives, but that we're, I really believe that 90% of us are trying to do what's best for our families. But yet we're being pulled into these ridiculous extremes, and we're taking it hook, line, and sinker from our nation's media and everywhere else, and I think that people need to back off social media. And I think they need to start having good conversations, with people in their communities and checking on their neighbors. And, if we just treat each other the way that we want to be treated ourselves, then, we're going to find out that life's not so bad in this country.
We sure make the formula difficult, don't we? When sometimes the answers are really a lot simpler. It doesn't mean there's not pain to get there, but breaking bread is something that we don't do often enough. But man, I appreciate you breaking bread, so to speak, with me again on this podcast. If we do it again, I promise we'll go make some investments to be able to have you here in the office, and we can do it face to face. There's one more question that I think Thomas had that we can end on, and that was, did you consult with Mark Wahlberg for the movie?
Oh, for Deepwater Horizon? Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he portrayed me. Yeah.
Were you on set, Brock?
He was the double. He did some stand-in work for me.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg is my stunt double. Absolutely.
Yes.
We
absolutely.
talk regularly, by the way.
I love it. I love it. Hey, Brock, man, thanks for hanging out with us. I know I took the entire hour, so this was killer. You and I could go on for 3 or 4 hours. There's so many little pieces inside of that we could probably spend an hour on, but I hope anybody gets to listen to this or watch it maybe sees you a little bit differently than what they saw in congressional testimonies and interviews with the press. You're a good guy. You have a great family, and the country was lucky to have you skirting the line between politics and first responders. You were the right guy. So I appreciate you, bud, and I appreciate your friendship.
Take care, Eric. Thanks, man.
All right, Brock.
All right, bud. See you.